Good morning, I'm Kenneth Moton.
And I'm Janae Norman. Here are the top 5 things to know this Wednesday. Number 1, the Democratic debate.
12 Democrats looking to unseat President Trump squared off in Ohio last night. This time it was Elizabeth Warren taking fire from all sides with her rivals, looking to derail her newfound frontrunner status, pressing her on how she plans to pay for Medicare for all.
And former Vice President Joe Biden defended his son's involvement in Ukraine. More from the candidates in a moment.
Number 2, the impeachment showdown in Washington.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has announced she will not hold a vote to authorize the impeachment investigation, despite demands from Republicans. A former aide to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo testifies today. Meanwhile, Rudy Giuliani is refusing to comply with the subpoena. On to number 3, the crisis in Syria. Turkey's assault on the Syrian Kurds has now displaced an estimated 175,000 people.
Vice President Mike Pence is heading to Turkey today, hoping to negotiate a ceasefire, but Turkey says it will not negotiate with the Kurds because it considers them to be terrorists.
As the U.S. withdraws 1,000 troops from northern Syria, Russian forces are now moving in to fill the void. The Russians are promising to prevent a clash between Turkish forces and Syrian soldiers who've now teamed up with the Kurds.
We head back here to New York for number 4. Prosecutors say they have at least a dozen women ready to testify that actor Cuba Gooding Jr. touched them inappropriately.
Gooding pleaded not guilty to sexual misconduct charges Tuesday, including a new claim by a woman who says Gooding groped her at a club. A judge will decide if the other accusers will be allowed to testify at the trial. And finally, number 5, the Washington Nationals are heading to their first ever World Series after sweeping the Cards.
The Nats scored 7 runs in the first inning last night, then hung on to beat St. Louis 7-4. As the champagne was being sprayed in the locker room, Nationals fans were partying in the streets.
It's the first time in 86 years that team from D.C. is going to the World Series.
And don't forget the ABC News app for all the trending stories with your 5 things to know. I'm Kenneth Moton.
And I'm Janae Norman. Good Wednesday morning, everyone. We begin with the Democrats who came out swinging last night, giving Senator Elizabeth Warren a taste of what it's like to be frontrunner.
It was the first debate since Warren surged in the polls, and she was forced to fend off sharp attacks from nearly every candidate on that stage, especially regarding her health care plan.
Take a look at the speaking times last night. Senator Elizabeth Warren with 5 more minutes than her closest rival, former Vice President Joe Biden. ABC's Rachel Scott is in Ohio with the highlights. Rachel, good morning.
Janae, Kenneth, good morning to you. Yes, it was a presidential primary first. 12 candidates on a single stage sparring for 3 hours. The night started by condemning President Trump, but that spotlight quickly turned to Senator Elizabeth Warren, who faced direct attacks from her Democratic rivals.
A rising Senator Elizabeth Warren riding into the 4th Democratic debate with a boost in the polls.
Shut down.
Let's figure out why it is that we
taking heat from her Democratic rivals.
You are making Republican talking points right now in this room.
The Massachusetts senator, known for her sweeping plans.
I will not sign a bill into law that does not lower costs for middle-class families.
Criticized for refusing to acknowledge if her Medicare for All policy would lead to tax increases.
At least Bernie's being honest here and saying how he's going to pay for this and that taxes are going to go up.
A yes or no question that didn't get a yes or no answer.
The divide on health care center stage, Warren pushing back.
Whenever someone hears the term Medicare for all who want it, understand what that really means. It's Medicare for all who can afford it.
But on the issue of impeachment, there was no debate.
Because as a former prosecutor, I know a confession when I see it.
He should be removed.
As President Trump calls for the Bidens to be investigated, former Vice President Joe Biden faced questions about his son's foreign business dealings while he was vice president.
My son did nothing wrong. I carried out the policy of the United States government in rooting out corruption in Ukraine.
And Senator Bernie Sanders stepping back into the ring after a recent heart attack, making clear he's ready to carry on.
We are going to be mounting a vigorous campaign all over this country.
A big moment also for Bernie Sanders, able to announce the endorsement of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at the close of the debate. So even though this field of 12 is going to start to shrink, I think this debate showed that there are several candidates that could still break through. We could be dealing with a larger than normal field, maybe all the way through Iowa.
And it's not just Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez that is backing Sanders. Representative Ilhan Omar also announced that she will support Sanders' bid for the White House. Janae, Kenneth?
All right, Rachel Scott there in Westerville, Ohio. Thank you. Now to the impeachment showdown in Washington and several developments overnight. House Democrats are dismissing Republican demands for an official vote on the impeachment investigation. It comes as more of President Trump's closest allies refuse to hand over documents about Ukraine. This morning, ABC News has confirmed the White House is now conducting its own internal review of President Trump's July phone call to the president of Ukraine, now at the center of the impeachment investigation. The internal review is looking into how a rough transcript of the call was placed in a private server. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the House will not hold a vote to formally authorize the impeachment inquiry, saying a formal vote is not required by the Constitution.
They can't defend the president, so they're going to process. We're not going there.
That decision is seen as a blow to Republicans, who say Democrats are not running a fair impeachment process.
It appears they have no intention of letting norms, precedents, or basic due process stand in the way as they seek to cancel out a presidency.
This morning, Vice President Mike Pence is refusing to hand over documents related to Ukraine, and the White House Budget Office says it will not comply with the subpoena. House investigators now say their case for obstruction is mounting.
But even as that case for obstruction continues to build, we are nonetheless continuing to get good and important information from these courageous witnesses.
Last night, a key State Department official wrapped up 10 hours of closed-door testimony. A lawmaker at the deposition says George Kent told House investigators that in May, Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney organized a meeting between Energy Secretary Rick Perry and Ambassador to the European Union Gordon Sondland and U.S. Envoy to Ukraine Kurt Volker. Kent says when it came to policy matters in Ukraine, he was instructed to defer to Volker, Sondland, and Perry, who call themselves the Three Amigos, and deferring to them meant going around the established policymaking channels. In the meantime, the president's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, is also defying a congressional subpoena to hand over documents. Giuliani is being scrutinized and accused of running a rogue operation to push Ukraine to investigate the president's political rival, Joe Biden, and his son, Hunter. Federal prosecutors are looking into Giuliani's business ties to these two men, seen here laughing with Giuliani at one of Trump's hotels.
I can't wait to come back. See you in Ukraine soon.
Those men are now behind bars, charged with illegally funneling foreign money into political campaigns, including PACs supporting President Trump. They both worked with Giuliani in Ukraine. Giuliani says a company owned by one of the men paid him $500,000 last year for legal advice and consulting on technology. Giuliani says his firm has 17 years of experience in this area of work. As for the so-called Three Amigos, members of Congress have already heard from Kurt Volker. Ambassador Sondland testifies tomorrow, and Rick Perry has been subpoenaed.
Well, now to the U.S. effort to prevent an all-out war in Syria as Turkey pushes deeper into the country, devastating Kurdish fighters and families fleeing the violence.
Vice President Mike Pence is heading to Turkey today, hoping to negotiate a ceasefire, and President Trump is holding a White House meeting to discuss the crisis with lawmakers from both parties. ABC's Ian Pannell has more.
With Turkey pounding northern Syria, another close call with American troops as Turkish forces come close to a U.S. base. The Americans responding with a show of force using an F-15 and Apache helicopters. This amid heavy fighting between Turkish-backed militias and the Kurds. Turkey says its military offensive aims to form a safe zone in Syria. It's the opposite. This is a war zone. And as America moves out, Russia moves in, the new power broker here. This Russian, who's worked for pro-government media, posting a tour of an abandoned U.S. outpost. The Americans were here yesterday, and now we are, he says. At least 160,000 people have now been displaced, many living in schools like this.
This is now home for dozens and dozens of families.
With Vice President Pence heading to Turkey, perhaps peace is possible, but not today, not here.
We're now seeing a major realignment in northern Syria, with Russia filling the vacuum left by the American withdrawal. Russian troops where American troops were, President Putin inviting President Erdogan of Turkey to visit Moscow, and he's accepted. This has been a major loss of standing and influence for the United States in the region. Ian Pannell, ABC News in northern Iraq.
Our thanks to Ian. Parents at an elementary school south of Milwaukee say they're just now learning about a vaping incident.
A second grader was caught vaping in class earlier this month. The 7-year-old told school officials that he got the device from his mother's purse and said it contained CBD oil, according to that mother. And after the incident, the child was taken to a hospital to get checked out.
A massive fire at a fuel storage facility in California's Bay Area has now been contained.
The fire involving 2 huge tanks containing ethanol burned well into the night. There were no injuries, but the blaze sent thick smoke into the air, prompting officials to declare an air quality emergency. One community was evacuated. Other area residents were told to stay indoors with the windows shut for more than 8 hours.
About 100 miles south, a magnitude 4.7 earthquake struck just southeast of Hollister. Experts say it's probably not connected to the previous day's quake in the Bay Area. No injuries or major damage was reported. That region is on edge because tomorrow is the 30th anniversary of the massive 1989 earthquake in the Bay Area, which killed more than 60 people. And we now have a new world record. Take a look at this. A massive cruise ship squeezing its way into the record books.
The MS Braemar is now the largest vessel to sail through the Corinth Canal in Greece. The canal is 79 feet wide, the ship 74 feet wide. That meant only 5 feet of breathing room to get the job done. More than 900 passengers paid an average of $5,500 apiece to take part in that trip.
Oh, thank goodness they didn't turn the wrong way.
No three-point turns there.
No. Coming up, a big World Cup qualifier soccer match, but no one there to see it. I'll tell you where this game was played.
Plus, a family discovered living in isolation, apparently waiting for the end of time. More when we go across the pond after this. Now to that. New details about the American prosecutor murder on a Pacific island.
She was gunned down outside her home, and now we've learned she'd faced threats in the past. This morning, a murder mystery in paradise. An American prosecutor shot and killed outside her home in the Pacific nation of Micronesia.
This is a shock to all of us. This is not Yap.
Authorities say Rochelle Bergeron was returning from a run on the island of Yap, where she served as acting attorney general when someone fired 3 shots, killing her and her dog. Her husband was home at the time of the shooting. He and a friend put her in the back of the truck and rushed her to the hospital.
We drove straight to the hospital, and they administered CPR all the way.
Bergeron, a Wisconsin native, first moved to Micronesia in 2015, taking a job as an assistant attorney general. She and her husband were about to celebrate their 1-year anniversary and planned to soon return to the United States. The couple's friend says Bergeron's job as a prosecutor made her a target, and she'd faced threats in the past.
She has to deal with a lot of the worst things of Yap because she's prosecuting people. It was basically the most dangerous job here in Yap, I'd say.
The FBI now sending a team to assist in the investigation. The island's governor took to Facebook vowing to find Bergeron's killer.
Her loss will be greatly felt by all who knew her. Yap's spirit is broken by this senseless and heinous act. As governor of the state of Yap, I promise to do everything in my power to have justice prevail.
Police say so far they have no suspects.
Now to the breaking news overnight. A former senior administration official confirms President Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, urged President Trump to extradite a Turkish cleric living in exile in the U.S. But White House officials stepped in and stopped any action from ever happening. Let's go across the pond now to Julia McFarland in the London Bureau for a reminder on why this is so important to Turkey's president. Julia, good morning.
Morning, Kenneth. Yes, this story first appeared on the Washington Post, and it claimed that the president's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, repeatedly pressed the president in the White House during their meetings over the matter of this U.S. permanent resident, Fethullah Gulen. He is an opposition figure. He lives in Pennsylvania. And President Erdogan over in Turkey, he blames him for orchestrating the failed coup in 2016. Now, just to bring you back, this was one night in July. This was a really, really dramatic night. All of a sudden, planes were buzzing the capital, Ankara. Soldiers started blocking all of the bridges over the Bosphorus, and an announcement by the PM had declared that an attempt to overthrow the government was underway. President Erdogan, he was out of the country at the time on holiday, but he called for his protesters to rally to the streets. And it was a violent night. TV stations were raided, protesters were shot at, and there were tanks moving on the streets of Ankara. The next morning, that army faction, they failed to get any more support, so it failed. But since then, Erdogan has orchestrated a massive clampdown. Thousands of government officials, lawyers, former army officials have been jailed since then. Now, because Fethullah Gulen is blamed by the Turkish government for orchestrating this coup, Erdogan really, really wants him to get back to Turkey and wants to have him stand trial for that part. But the US has been hesitant to. So in this story, Rudy Giuliani, he denied that he was acting in the interests of Turkey. He is, of course, not registered as a foreign lobbyist, which he would have to be doing if he was representing a foreign country's interests on US policy. But it's yet another sort of really interesting and confusing and frankly, a bit of a nightmare for the White House as this impeachment inquiry regarding Ukraine presses ahead.
Another development there. And moving on to really bizarre situation in the Netherlands where authorities say they're investigating a family living in a basement, apparently waiting for the end of time.
Yeah, this is a really, really bizarre story. This tiny, tiny property near this small village in the Netherlands, really unknown to anyone until all of a sudden at a bar, this young man who's about 25 years old, he stumbles in, incredibly disheveled according to local patrons at the time. He was looking bewildered and he said, "I've run away and I need help." Now, what police say yesterday after a press conference was that a man of 58 and 5 young adults between 18 and 25 were found on this property, and the children, the 18 to 25-year-olds, they reportedly hadn't had any contact with the outside world for 9 years. And the father, he was in ailing health because he was bedridden after a stroke. He's been arrested, and that group of young adults, they've all been taken into medical care. But an incredibly bizarre story. Police are still trying to get to the bottom of this, but it appears that they lived on this property. They survived on vegetables in the backyard and animals that they tended there. But an incredibly strange story that no one had any idea until one of these young men managed to break free and call for help.
Wow, just incredible details there. Speaking of incredible details, should we just really talk about a brutal dictator on a white horse?
Yeah, Kim Jong-un. Was he borrowing a play from the playbook of Vladimir Putin, perhaps, trekking up this sacred mountain? Now, he was talking about US sanctions, and that's, of course, one of the reasons why, or the main reason why, talks between the US and North Korea have stalled recently. That's not the only interesting thing that happened yesterday. I want to talk about the football match between North Korea and South Korea. I just want to take you over to the Kim Il-sung Stadium in Pyongyang, because North Korea and South Korea, longtime foes, of course, they were playing their World Cup qualifier with not a fan in the crowd. There was no one there, no press, no goals on either side were scored, although a couple players from both sides got yellow cards. Now, it's very interesting because the North Korean official news agency, they covered the story, but South Korean news, they weren't able to cover the story at all. But this is sort of indicative of North Korea's protectionism. They didn't want anyone to see just in case they lost. And I can kind of understand that, right?
Yeah, the embarrassment.
You want to cover your back. Huh?
And we know North Korea, he'd probably execute the entire team if they lost. And I'm saying that in jest, but likely that would happen with a dictator like Kim Jong-un.
You say that. Well, it's funny you say that, because a couple of South Korean football fans who were interviewed by The Guardian, they said that they were really disappointed that they couldn't watch this qualifier because it happens every few years. They just wanted to get their team home safely, no matter what the result.
Yeah,
so
indeed.
It is a real fear, I guess.
And as far as Kim Jong-un on that horse channeling Putin, let's just be glad he didn't ride it shirtless like Putin.
bit cold. I'd have been impressed if he did, but I don't think anyone would have wanted to see that.
A little nipply,
really.
I'm sure. Julia.
Exactly.
Thank you, my friend. We appreciate it.
See you soon.
All right, let's get a check of our notifications, starting with the starting lineup of the New Jersey Devils hockey team, brought to you by the art of some proud parents' refrigerators. Children drew the players' portraits for the pregame introduction, and then they used
I think they did a pretty good job there. Yeah. Looks pretty closely like them. Hey, next, 25 years after Friends premiered, its 6 stars have reunited, and Jennifer Aniston has finally joined Instagram to celebrate the occasion.
And she posted this photo along with the caption, "And now we're Instagram friends too." Hi, Instagram. Fans were excited with more than 115,000 people following Jen in her first hour on the platform.
And then her page crashed. The spokesperson describes the volume of interest as incredible. Her profile is back up and running this morning with more than 5 million followers in less than 25 hours.
As for the outage, let's say Jen and Insta were on a break.
On a break. Next with the awkward moment on Wheel of Fortune.
We all know that moment when host Pat Sajak asked each contestant to tell the viewers a little bit about themselves. But recently, one guy went just a bit too far.
Blair Davis, Cardiff, California, owned the trucking business, it says here.
Small trucking business in San Diego.
Good for you. And talk about your family.
I've been trapped in a loveless marriage for the last 12 years to an old battle axe named Kim. She cursed my life with 3 stepchildren named Star, RJ, and Ryan, and I have 1 rotten grandson.
Yay! No wonder you came here. You just wanted to get away from everybody. I know you're being facetious.
Absolutely. I love them like nobody's business.
I'll bet you do.
At least he hoped you.
Yeah, I know, right? Blair explained the length of his beard, saying he started growing it a couple of years back, but every time he threatens to shave it off, his grandson gives him a really hard time. So he keeps it. And next to the simple question, Lady Gaga asked her 79 million Twitter followers on Tuesday.
What's Fortnite?
What?
While some of her fans let her know that it's an incredibly popular video game, others had some jokes. One fan tweeted that Fortnite is, quote, the length of my longest relationship.
Oh, okay. And another little monster wrote, it's another word for 2 weeks, a.k.a. the longest we should have to wait for the lead single to Lady Gaga's 6th album.
And next to a freshly minted puppy that shocked a family in Colorado.
Their Great Dane recently gave birth to a litter of puppies, and one of them is green. It's a rare phenomenon that happens when a puppy comes in contact with certain fluids in the womb, dyeing its fur.
The color will fade in a few weeks, and the dog is appropriately named Verdant,
which means green. Verdant. In Spanish, it's verde. Spanish minor. Coming up, we'll have a look at what's in store for the day ahead.
Plus, One Sister's tribute to hardworking nurses across the country after this. Here's what to watch out for today. President Trump is set to welcome the president of Italy to the White House, where they will hold a joint press conference and a reception celebrating Italian-American heritage.
Democrats running for president will try to keep up the momentum after last night's debate. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Pete Buttigieg hold events in Iowa while others hit the campaign trail in New Hampshire.
A major storm system is moving through the deep south up the East Coast and could join another from the Midwest to form a nor'easter with up to 3 inches of rain from Philadelphia to Boston and gusty winds. The strongest will be near 70 miles an hour on Cape Cod. All that means the likely postponements of tonight's baseball playoff game.
Plus, don't forget to tune into the debrief for an update on all our top stories, the briefing room for a breakdown of the latest headlines in politics. And finally, to a picture that caught our attention on social media showing a nurse exhausted after a long shift.
Laura McIntyre posted this picture of her sister Katie after she'd worked 53 hours and 4 days. She said her sister's so good at what she does that she often forgets how to take care of herself.
She said, Katie and all other nurses, you are special. You bless your patients and your families more than you'll ever know.
And that brings us to our question of the day.
53 hours and 4 days. That's, as we mentioned, really a record, I feel.
Yeah, it's got to be. So what's the longest shift you've ever worked? Tell us your story in the comments or tweet us at ABC News Live.
We work those long hours, long days as well. We know all about it.
We feel you.
Exhausted. Have a great day. We'll see you.